My name is Marianne Kepler, and I turned 59 tonight. I've never cared for birthdays much, but my daughter insisted on dinner somewhere nice. So here I am under harsh pendant lights, surrounded by people young enough to call me ma'am, watching Haley scroll through her phone between bites of truffle pasta. She talks mostly to the screen. Something about a new client, an influencer partnership, deadlines. I nod, sip my water, and wait for a pause that never comes. The server brings dessert, a square of chocolate cake the size of a credit card, with a single candle stuck awkwardly in the center. Haley claps her hands once, smiling for her husband's camera. When the laughter fades, I clear my throat. Sweetheart, could you send me part of what you owe? I need to see the doctor next week. Her fork stops halfway to her mouth. Mom, she says, too loudly. Stop asking for money. It's embarrassing. The word hangs between us like smoke. The table next to ours turns quiet. Haley's husband glances down at his napkin. I nod as if agreeing with her, though my hands feel suddenly cold. You're right. Honey, I say, let's not make a scene. I excuse myself and walk toward the restroom, the candlelight flickering behind me. In the mirror, my reflection looks calm, almost serene. I take out my phone, open the banking app, and type one short message. Cancel all authorized user cards immediately. The confirmation ping sounds gentle, like a raindrop. I smooth my blouse, touch up my lipstick, and return to the table. Haley is laughing again, her phone lighting up the space between us. I sit down, pick up my fork, and taste the cake. It's sweeter than I remember. Rain was already whispering against the windows when I woke. That soft Seattle kind of rain, the kind that never quite stops. Just lingers. Polite and persistent. For a moment, I lay still, listening. No calls, no footsteps, no noise, but the steady rhythm outside. Peaceful, I thought, and then my phone started vibrating. The first message came from Haley Mom. My card got declined. Did you change something? 2 minutes later, I'm at the grocery store. This is ridiculous. Then a string of notifications calls, voicemails, texts, stacking like dominoes. By the time I reached the kitchen, she'd moved from confusion to fury. You can't just do that. How am I supposed to pay for things? Call me now, I poured coffee. One careful splash of milk, the way I always did when life felt too loud. The clock over the stove blinked 7:42. I hadn't woken up this early since Peter died. I opened my laptop, logged into the clinic portal, and clicked confirm appointment. Thursday, 10:30 a.m. Blood work and checkup. Finally. The house felt different, somehow lighter, like it had exhaled overnight. No buzzing in my chest. No guilt pressing behind my ribs. I left my phone on the counter, still flashing with Haley's name, and stepped outside with my umbrella. The air smelled like wet cedar and coffee grounds from a neighbor's porch. Across the street, a boy walked his dog in a bright yellow raincoat, humming to himself. Ordinary life kept moving, and for once, I didn't feel like I was chasing after it. I walked slowly down to the corner cafe and ordered a scone. The barista, a girl about Haley's age, smiled and called me sweetheart. I smiled back. The word didn't sting this time. The drizzle softened to mist as I stood beneath the awning, warm cup in hand, breathing air that finally felt like mine. It began with a phone call I could still hear in my sleep. Haley's voice, small and shaking. The week after Peter's funeral. Mom, I hate to ask, but we're short on rent this month. Mark's commission hasn't come through yet. I didn't even hesitate. I'd just written thank you cards for sympathy flowers and stacked unpaid medical bills on the counter. But I told her, of course, sweetheart, I'll transfer it tonight. It was a few $100s that first time. Then came the next call. 2 months later this time. 1,000. Then 3. Each story sounded reasonable, even urgent. The car needs new tires. The kids need new tablets for school. Mark's company is restructuring. I told myself that's what mothers were for, to keep the edges from falling apart. When Haley wanted to remodel her condo kitchen, she showed me glossy photos of marble counters and pendant lights. "It'll raise the property value," she said, her voice bright with certainty. I believed her because I wanted to. $30,000 later, she texted a photo of the finished space sunlight on white tile, a vase of tulips by the sink. She didn't thank me. She just captioned it. "Finally feels like home." At night, I balanced my own checkbook at the kitchen table, pencil worn to the nub. My mortgage, utilities, insurance all lined up neatly beside the transfers. Marked Haley. I didn't tell anyone how tight it had become, how I'd stopped buying fresh flowers for myself, how I'd stretched one pot of soup over 4 days. Once, when I gently mentioned repayment, she laughed like it was a joke between us. "You're comfortable." "Mom, you don't need to count every penny." That sentence settled deep in my chest and stayed there, heavy as a stone. I started seeing it everywhere, in the way she ordered wine without checking the price, in the way she signed her name on bills I'd covered. Somewhere between love and duty, I'd disappeared, still present, still paying, but fading with every deposit I made in her name. By mid-morning, the rain had thinned to a cold drizzle, the kind that leaves tiny silver beads on the window but never really stops. I was folding laundry in the living room, clean sheets, still warm from the dryer, when the sharp ring of the doorbell cut through the quiet. One press, then another. Haley stood on the porch, damp hair plastered to her temples, fury flickering behind her mascara. "You humiliated me," she said, before I could even say hello. "Mark couldn't buy groceries this morning." The card got declined in front of the cashier. Do you know how that looked? I kept folding. I imagine it looked like what it was, money that wasn't yours to spend. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "You had no right to do that. Those cards were for the family. They were for emergencies," I said, smoothing the edge of a pillowcase. "Not handbags. Not hotels. Not weekends in Vancouver." Her mouth fell open. "You went through my transactions. They're my accounts." "Haley, you didn't leave much to the imagination." She took a step closer, voice rising. "You're making me sound like a thief." "I'm your daughter." I finally looked up. "Being related doesn't mean you get unlimited withdrawals." Her expression twisted. Hurt. Disbelief. Maybe both. "You've changed," she said, her tone softening, as if pity might still work. "No," I said. "I just stopped sponsoring my own betrayal." For a heartbeat, everything was still the ticking clock, the rain against the glass, even the air between us. Then she spun toward the door, slamming it hard enough to rattle the picture frames. Through the window, I watched her stride down the driveway, fumbling for her car keys. The taillights flared red before disappearing into the mist. I stood there for a long time, the scent of fabric softener and rain filling the room. The quiet felt different now, not the kind born of fear or exhaustion, but something steadier, deliberate. I carried the folded laundry to the bedroom and stacked it neatly in the closet. My hands were still, my breathing even. For the first time in years, I didn't cry. 2 days after Haley's visit, I came home from the market to find 3 cars parked in front of my house. The sight of them lined neatly along the curb made my stomach tighten before I even reached the porch. Inside, Haley stood in the living room, her arms crossed, flanked by her brother Derek and his wife, Lena. Someone had placed a casserole on the counter like an offering. "Mom," Haley began, her voice soft, rehearsed. "We're here because we love you." That was never a good start. Derek gestured toward the couch. "Why don't we all sit down? We just want to talk." I hung my coat, took my time putting away the groceries. You're already talking, I said. Go ahead. Haley sighed. Look, freezing our accounts like that, it's not normal. It's not like you. We're worried something's wrong. Maybe grief is catching up to you again. There it was, the gentle accusation wrapped in concern. I'd heard versions of it for years. You're too emotional. You're overreacting. You need help. Lena, ever the diplomat, chimed in. We think it might help to see someone, just to sort things out. I have seen someone, I said, setting a bag of apples on the counter. My banker. Haley flushed. This isn't funny. Mom? I'm not laughing. The silence that followed was thick, the kind that fills every corner of a room and makes breathing feel like noise. Then I walked to the dining table and set down the folder I'd prepared days ago. I spread the papers one by one. Bank transfers, repayment promises, copies of text messages where they'd called the money temporary help. If I'm confused, I said, these might refresh my memory. Haley's face went pale. Derek leaned forward, scanning the numbers. Mom, you didn't have to keep records like this. Yes, I did. I replied. Someone had to. Love shouldn't erase accountability. Haley's composure cracked. So what now? You're cutting us off? Suing your own family, I'm giving you 60 days. I said quietly. Come up with a written repayment plan, or I'll speak to an attorney. I want this settled properly. Lena shifted uneasily. That's a little extreme, don't you think? What's extreme, I said, is realizing I've been financing adults who call it love. No one spoke. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hesitate. I gathered the papers into a neat stack, smoothing the edges as if tidying up the conversation. Coffee, I asked, because it was easier than watching their faces. Haley shook her head, eyes glossy. Derek muttered something about calling later. They left together, the door closing softly behind them. I poured myself a cup anyway, steam curling into the quiet. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel heavy. It felt honest. The alert came on a Monday afternoon while I was paying bills at the kitchen table. The subject line on the email read, "Unusual activity detected." I almost ignored it, another automated warning. I thought, but the last 4 digits of the card number caught my eye. That account was supposed to be closed months ago. When I opened the statement, a list of transactions filled the screen like a confession. Airline tickets, spa packages, boutique purchases in Bellevue, subscriptions to streaming services I didn't recognize. The charges stretched across months, small enough to avoid notice, frequent enough to build into thousands. For a moment, I couldn't move. The number beside total balance due seemed to pulse on the page. I scrolled to the account name. It wasn't a stranger. Haley M. Whitman had been added as a digital wallet user. I stared at her name, the way it glowed faintly against the pale background. The same name I'd once written on birthday cards, college checks, and loan transfers, always believing she'd never take what wasn't offered. I called the bank. The woman on the other end spoke gently, as though comforting someone who'd just lost something precious. We'll open a fraud report. Mrs. Kepler, the transactions will be investigated. Would you like to freeze your other accounts? All of them, I said. Every card, every transfer. When I hung up, the house felt unnaturally quiet. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to pause, listening. I looked around at the simple things, my coffee mug, the folded dish towel, the half-finished crossword on the counter, and wondered how many of them had been paid for with the same account she'd used. I thought about the kitchen remodel, the $30,000, the laughter at my birthday dinner. I remembered her voice saying, "You're comfortable. Mom, you don't need to count every penny." I reached for my old leather journal, the one Peter had given me before he died. The cover was worn smooth at the corners, the pages faintly yellowed. I opened to a clean sheet and wrote a single line in neat, deliberate ink. Kindness without limits is self-destruction. The words sat there, sharp and steady. I underlined them twice, closed the journal, and laid my pen across the top. Outside, rain began again, soft but insistent. It tapped against the window pane like someone asking to be heard. This time, I didn't answer. The conference room smelled faintly of paper and lemon polish, the kind of sterile scent that makes people behave. I sat at one end of a long wooden table, my folder of documents resting in front of me like armor. Across from me were Haley and Mark Shee in a crisp white blouse, he with his hands clasped too tightly on his lap. Between us sat Ms. Patel, the mediator, calm and precise. A legal pad, already half filled with notes. The hum of traffic outside the downtown office window sounded distant, almost unreal. I'd walked here through drizzle, the city lights blurring into streaks, and told myself to keep breathing evenly. This wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. Ms. Patel began with the facts: bank transfers, written promises, timestamps, and then the charges from the dormant card. Haley's eyes flicked toward me when the total appeared on the screen: $30,000. For a moment, she looked less angry than afraid. Mark cleared his throat. There must be some misunderstanding. Haley didn't. She did. Ms. Patel said softly, "The digital signature confirms it." Haley's lip trembled, but she stayed silent. I spoke carefully, each word placed like a stone. "I'm not punishing you," I said. "I'm reminding you that I exist." No one answered. Even the pen in Ms. Patel's hand seemed to pause midair. We moved to terms. Repayment of $30,000, with modest interest, deducted automatically from their account for 3 years. Any missed payment would trigger legal action. Ms. Patel asked if both parties agreed. I nodded first. Haley hesitated, then signed her name. When it was done, she looked up, her voice small. "You'd really take your daughter to court?" I closed my folder, slipped the papers into my bag. "No, dear," I said. I'd take back my self-respect. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sidewalks gleamed like glass as I walked toward the bus stop. In the reflection of a darkened shop window, I caught my own face, older. Sharper, maybe, but finally clear. The city felt quieter now. Or maybe it was just me learning to breathe again. The waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain-soaked coats. I hadn't sat in one of these chairs since Peter was alive. Back then, I was the one taking notes, keeping track of his medications, pretending strength while the doctor spoke in quiet tones. Today, it was just me, and for once, that felt like a kind of freedom. Dr. Larson, a gentle woman with silver hair and warm eyes, adjusted her glasses and smiled after taking my blood pressure. "A bit high," she said, "but nothing we can't manage. Some rest, lighter meals, maybe a walk every day." I nodded, exhaling slowly. The number on the machine didn't scare me. I'd lived with worse pressure, the kind that came from silence, from being needed but never seen. When she left to print the summary, I laughed under my breath, not my heart. I thought, my patience. That's what finally gave out, and maybe it needed to. Outside, the drizzle had cleared into pale light. I stopped by a small store near the clinic and bought myself a pair of walking shoes. Nothing fancy. Soft leather. Navy blue. The clerk tied the laces neatly and wished me a good afternoon. It had been years since anyone had said that to me, with no expectation attached. I took the long route home along the path by Puget Sound. The air tasted of salt and pine, the water shifting from gray to silver under a shy sun. I walked slowly, counting my breaths, letting my body remember what unhurried felt like. Somewhere between the cafe and the ferry dock, I murmured to myself, almost smiling. I thought peace came from forgiveness. Turns out it comes from invoices. The sound of waves covered the rest, a rhythm that felt like something steady returning something that had always belonged to me. A year passed quietly, measured not by arguments or balance sheets, but by seedlings and sunlight. I had joined the community garden that spring, tending a small patch of soil behind the library. Now, on my 60th birthday, a few neighbors gathered in my kitchen with homemade pies and secondhand candles that sputtered unevenly in the drafts from the window. We ate, laughed, and told stories about our plants, how some thrived, some refused, and some surprised us when we'd nearly given up on them. It felt right. This simple company of people who wanted nothing from me but my time. After the dishes were rinsed and the door closed behind the last guest, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. Outside, Seattle shimmered under a thin curtain of rain. The city sounded softer at night, as if learning how to whisper again. My phone buzzed once on the table. A new message. Transfer. Complete Haley Whitman. Below it, dinner. Soon, my treat. For a long moment, I just looked at it. The glow of the screen reflected in the glass. The rain traced slow. Silver lines down the window pane. I thought about the kitchen remodel, the mediation room, the papers we'd both signed. About the way she couldn't meet my eyes the last time we spoke. I smiled, small and certain, and turned off the phone. Maybe next year, I said to the empty room. The wind rose outside, gentle but insistent, carrying away the hum of the traffic, the memory of old noise. What was left was stillness, clean, quiet, and wholly mine.